My name is Margaret Hale, I'm 72, and this past December, over bland eggs and a half-full mug of coffee, my daughter-in-law looked me in the eye and said, "We've decided not to have you join us for Christmas this year." She said it like she was commenting on traffic. My son, James, sat beside her, staring at a wrinkle in his napkin. He didn't say a word. I didn't ask why, I didn't argue, I just nodded slowly and took another sip from my cup. It was easier to hold back the sting than to show it. We were at Birch Hearth Café, our usual pre-holiday spot, same window seat. The brick walls were dressed in pine boughs, and soft golden lights blinked around the glass panes. It smelled of nutmeg and lemon polish, but the warmth of it missed me entirely. I'd arrived before them, as I always did, ordered my usual, a cappuccino and a slice of orange cranberry loaf. The waitress, Nina, the one with the cropped hair and gentle voice, didn't even have to ask. She just smiled, set it down, and said, "Nice to see you, Miss Hale." That was the kindest moment of the day. When James and Rachel walked in, I half hoped they were bringing news from my granddaughter, Lily. Maybe she'd painted another ornament or written me a Christmas card. But no, what they carried was a decision, tidy, rehearsed, and delivered with courtesy. "We're scaling back this year," Rachel said. "Lily needs more structure, and Ben's still too young to remember." I nodded again, not in agreement but because I wanted the moment to be over. The bread stayed untouched, my cappuccino grew cold beside it. I reached for my handbag, fished out the exact change, and placed it next to the plate. "I'll pay for mine," I said softly. No one stopped me as I rose, no one asked how I felt. As I stepped out into the cold with my coat wrapped tight, I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving because I finally understood. I had no lines left in the story they were writing. The wind stung as I walked along the salted pavement. I didn't hurry, there was nowhere I needed to be. Cars moved slowly through the slush, children pulled on scarves, and mothers clutched paper bags filled with ribbon and wrapping. Everyone seemed headed somewhere, except me. I passed the old bookshop where I used to take James when he was small. He loved the globe mural on the ceiling, used to gaze at it while I browsed the classics. It was still there, but now a notice filled the window, "Closing soon, all titles 60% off." Another quiet thread unraveled. That place had once felt like mine, not by ownership, but by familiarity. I knew the creaky hinge on the back shelf, I knew the tabby cat who dozed on the counter, and now, like everything else I'd once quietly belonged to, it was disappearing, just like my place at the table. There's a strange ache that comes when you realize your absence changes nothing. It doesn't cut like a blade, it drifts through you, as if you were never really there to begin with. I walked on, past the bakery where I'd once ordered birthday cakes for Lily, past the shop where I'd chosen poinsettias for Rachel every December. No one waved, no one stopped me. Maybe they remembered me. But I wasn't part of the season anymore. The world hadn't pushed me out, it had simply kept moving, and never looked back. And that, I think, is the deepest kind of loss, not being rejected, but being quietly erased. My fingers trembled slightly as I searched for my keys, not from cold or age, but from something else, the body's strange reaction to invisible grief, a kind of confusion in the blood when it's no longer needed. James hadn't spoken up, he hadn't stood beside me. Maybe he thought I was unshakable. Maybe silence felt easier than discomfort. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's exile. For years I'd said yes, I gave up the best seat, skipped onions in the stuffing because Rachel disliked them, wrapped presents carefully while ignoring my own exhaustion, and I never once asked for thanks. I thought that being accommodating would keep me close. Instead, it made me easier to exclude. And as I stood on the curb, watching silhouettes gather behind frosted windows, I understood this much. I wasn't in the frame anymore. Not because I didn't belong, but because I was no longer seen. When I returned home, the apartment was dim, the radiator clanked softly, a faint lavender scent hung in the air, left from the sachets I tucked into drawers each fall. I hung up my coat, stood in the hallway a moment, unsure what to do with myself. Then, like I had for decades, I reached for the attic cord and pulled down the ladder. Even if I wasn't welcome, the box was still there. The Christmas box waited quietly in the corner, sealed with aged tape and a well-worn red ribbon. I carried it down carefully, mindful not to let it bump the railing. It groaned when I set it on the table, like a soft voice whispering, "You still matter." Inside were ornaments wrapped in thin, yellowed newsprint. Some were chipped, a few had dulled, but they were mine, each one a memory. The wooden angel James carved in elementary school. The tiny mitten I'd embroidered with Lily's name her first Christmas. At the bottom lay a few sprigs of dried pine I had saved, for the scent. I held one up to my nose, still carried a hint of something sharp and green, something that hadn't entirely let go of life. There was no Christmas tree this year, no roast in the oven, no sound of children's feet darting across the hallway. Still, I wiped down each ornament gently, cloth in hand, as if they were sacred, as if someone might see them, but no one would. This used to bring me joy, now, it was simply muscle memory. Not once, in all the years I've been doing this, had anyone said, "We'd love for you to be there." No one asked what dish I might like to bring, what time I'd prefer to arrive. I was never actually invited. I just kept showing up because I thought that's what mothers were supposed to do. The gifts had been wrapped weeks ago. A buttery soft scarf for Lily, because she can't stand scratchy sweaters. A police-themed Lego kit for Ben, he always liked building little cities. And for James, a gift card to the hardware store and a gray wool scarf, same every year, tucked in a plain envelope, as always. He never opened it while I was there. No one ever said thank you. But I never waited around for gratitude. I thought remembering them was an act of love. I didn't realize I was also showing them how to forget me. And maybe the most dangerous kind of tradition is the one where we love quietly, never asking if our presence is still welcome. The old ornament box didn't resist, it never did. But this year, as I folded the brittle tissue paper and laid it back inside, I murmured into the silence, "This isn't the legacy I want." I'd spent 37 years as a financial analyst. Numbers made sense to me, I could track every cent, balance any account, find what was missing. But I'd never turned that same clarity inward. Not until last week. That morning, I cleared off my kitchen table, scarred from years of family meals and one cracked plate from last Christmas. I set down a cup of black coffee, opened my laptop, and pulled out a red pen. Not to blame, not to accuse, just to see it all clearly. I made a simple spreadsheet, each row, a moment, each column, a year. At the top, I wrote, what I've given. Paying James's internet bill? 4 years, $200 a month. Rachel had once said, "Just keep it in your name so it doesn't get shut off." Did I nod? Did I agree? I can't remember. Total, $9,600. Covered the basement flood, took care of the insurance, paid it outright. $14,500. Car down payment for Rachel when Lily started school. $6,200. Summer coding camp for Lily. $1,800. Emergency room visit for Ben when he had that terrible fever. $3,200. And then there were the groceries I delivered, the light bills I covered when they fell behind, the quiet Amazon purchases around every birthday and holiday. The total blinked at me, $276,800. It wasn't the amount that made me pause. It was the fact that I had survived it, barely, quietly, like someone walking across a frozen pond, only realizing how thin the ice had been once they were safely across. I never asked to be repaid, never even expected acknowledgement. But over time, my giving stopped being seen as generous. It became a baseline, assumed, invisible. I had become their silent foundation, and like most foundations, they never thought to say thank you. That afternoon, I made a phone call to the law firm I'd worked with for years. "I'd like to cancel all recurring payments," I said calmly. "And I want to review every document with my name on it." My voice didn't waver. Later that day, I walked to a small cafe down the block, stainless steel tables, peppermint tea served in chipped ceramic mugs. Silas was already there. His hair was a bit whiter than I remembered. We'd volunteered together, doing tax help at the community center. "I heard you're updating your estate plan," he said as I sat down. I nodded. It's time I took myself seriously. He didn't press, just handed me a folded piece of paper. On it, in his neat handwriting, "They didn't leave you out because you didn't matter. They left you out because they thought you'd never leave." I smiled, faint but real. Maybe I'd been too available for too long. Maybe stepping away was the only way to be seen again. I didn't walk away angry. That part often confuses people. I left because I stayed far too long in a place where I was treated like furniture, always there, never acknowledged. And the realization didn't arrive in a dramatic flash. It came the way winter does, quiet, constant, unignorable. Back home, I opened the file drawer in my bedroom. There were 3 folders already labeled, James, Lily, Ben. I added a 4th, Margaret. Then, I moved $12,000 into an account with only my name on it. Not for emergencies, not for their tuition or a car battery. Just for me. It felt selfish, until it felt like oxygen. No one needed to know. That evening, I packed a small overnight bag. Wool sweaters, my reading glasses, the book I'd started but never finished. And the keys to the lake cabin, our old winter retreat, now mine alone. The snow had started to fall as I drove. The cabin sat near a quiet lake rimmed with evergreens. Wind sang through the trees, the air was sharp and pure. Inside, the scent of cedar and cold air greeted me like an old friend. No one had been here since last Christmas. I lit a fire with the newspaper I'd stacked by the hearth last winter. The flames crackled slowly, like they were remembering how to offer comfort. I sat cross-legged on the floor, listening to the creak of the cabin, to the soft catch of heat. This space had once echoed with children's voices, steaming mugs, wool socks drying near the heater. Now it held just me. And, for once, that was enough. I didn't write a goodbye, didn't send a message. I simply stopped showing up to a place where I had already disappeared. Sometimes the most radical act of self-love isn't raising your voice. It's walking away in silence. And choosing to belong to yourself again. The next morning, I stepped outside, snow crunching under my boots. I drew in a deep breath of cold pine air. It smelled like frost and wood smoke. And something else, too. Maybe it was peace. Maybe it was freedom. The cabin groaned softly in the wind, like it was slowly waking up after a long stretch of being left alone. I followed the trail that led to the old farmer's market near the edge of the woods. In winter, it was hushed, only a handful of vendors still braving the cold, huddled near space heaters buzzing under their tables. I picked up a sack of Honeycrisp apples. At the baked goods stand, a face turned toward me, eyes narrowing as she studied mine. "Margaret Hale?" she asked. "Is that really you?" It was Colleen Fisher. We'd gone to school together once upon a time, exchanged cards a few Christmases before letting time stretch too far between us. Last I heard, her son tried to sell her home behind her back. She'd taken him to court, and won. "I kept the house," she said, lifting a paper bag of pastries. But I couldn't hold on to the quiet. I understood her more than I could say. We walked the trail back together, our boots pressing gently into the snow. Inside the cabin, I made hot cocoa the way my husband used to, melted dark chocolate, a little sugar, a whisper of cinnamon. Colleen sat on the steps, both hands wrapped around the mug like someone who still remembered mornings in the garden. We didn't talk about holidays or children or the particular kind of loneliness that settles in around December. We didn't need to. There comes a point in life where the words don't soothe, they sting. She gazed out at the lake, its surface thin and frozen over. "You can get used to being alone," she said. "But it doesn't stop you from noticing what's missing." I nodded. Sometimes the heater kicks on in the middle of the night and for a second, I think it's laughter, but it's not. It's just the sound of not being him. We sat in silence. 2 women who had spent lifetimes giving, now learning how to hold something back just for themselves. I told her the story of the cabin, how my late husband built it from scratch after our 2nd anniversary, how James broke his arm falling from the old pine tree, how I used to blame the woods, but always came back. Colleen gave a knowing smile. People don't take care of things they didn't have to earn. I let out a quiet laugh. We don't hang on to blame, we hang on to the pieces of ourselves we left behind. She didn't answer, she didn't have to. Some words don't need a reply, they just need to land. When she left, she gave a small wave, no goodbye, no promises. And I didn't feel alone. Some people just know when to show up, that's enough. 3 days before Christmas, I noticed the SUV parked near the gate. Engine running, windows fogged. A familiar silver gray. Same plate James got when he got that promotion, years ago. I didn't rush to the door, didn't hide either. I stood there, mug in hand, letting the silence take its time. Eventually, the doors opened. Rachel stepped out first, holding a neatly wrapped box. James followed, hesitating. And then Lily appeared, bundled in a red hoodie, something green and handmade cradled in her arms. I cracked the door slightly. "There's coffee," I said. No apologies, no explanations. Just boots on snow and the quiet creak of the floorboards under old weight. Rachel placed the gift on the table without a word. James looked around the room like he was stepping into a memory that no longer belonged to him. Lily stood near the fireplace, watching the tiny tree I'd decorated with paper cones and backyard pine. Rachel finally spoke. I wasn't sure why you left so suddenly. I figured you needed space, but Lily missed you. I turned to Lily. She didn't speak either. Just gently set down a wreath she'd made, twisted wire, bits of ribbon, 2 crooked paper snowflakes. James sat down, his voice quiet. When you left, I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't move, just took a sip from my cup. I'm not angry, I said. I've just stopped waiting for permission to be myself. They didn't protest, didn't try to defend. They knew. I had finally put myself at the center of my own life. When they left, no one asked if I'd be coming back. I stayed at the table, listening to the snow crunch beneath their boots, softer now as they drifted away. Before they pulled off, I caught Lily looking back through the frost-glazed window. She smiled, small and uncertain, like only an 11-year-old can. I didn't know if it was for me. But it didn't matter. Because for once, I wasn't waiting to be included. I had chosen myself already. A week later, I walked into Pine Hollow Books, the little shop on the corner where time seemed to slow down and the windows always steamed over in winter. Evelyn, the owner, looked up as the bell chimed. Margaret, she said, beaming, I was hoping we'd see you again. I brought a tin of cinnamon cookies and a dog-eared copy of Snowbound Tales. The children were already gathered on the rug near the heater, cocoa in hand, eyes wide. I read them a story about a woman who lived alone in a cabin by the woods. She wasn't magical, she wasn't cursed. She was just someone the world forgot, who learned how to remember herself. No one asked if she had grandchildren. They just asked, can she have an adventure next time? Afterward, Evelyn handed me a card. We'd love to make it official. Margaret Hale, storyteller in residence. I smiled, not for the title, but because for the first time in years, my name stood on its own. No mom, no grandma. Just Margaret. And maybe, finally, that's enough. After a lifetime of filling every role they gave me, I remembered who I was without them. And I liked her.